Hey everyone, and we are moving right through into Module 6, I believe is what we are on right now, right? Yes, Module 6, and there's a good amount of content that we're covering in this week's module. For one, we're looking at just a section of Chapter 2 of the text, and Chapter 2 is a phenomenal chapter, and we'll get to the rest of it at another point in the semester, but for this week's module, I just want you to be focusing on the multicultural section of Chapter 2. And then Chapter 7, which focuses on reflection of feelings in counseling and how reflecting clients' feelings as part of the follow-up that we're doing when we're listening to clients can build trust, it can build that relationship, and it can convey that we are using our active listening skills, that we are appropriately reflecting, summarizing, and paraphrasing what they're saying to us, and that we are empathetic to the situation that they are describing to us. So today I wanted to first take a little bit of time to touch base about the immersion week, and then I'm really just going to give a little bit of a lecture on Chapter 2, the multicultural section. Multicultural issues are something you're going to hear about throughout the program. You also have your cultural issues course, obviously, but I really do try to incorporate it throughout my classes, at least within one module, if not more than that, especially in my 606 class. You'll see it quite frequently pop up as something that we should be focusing on. But first, Immersion Week. So we are getting close to the date of Immersion Week. Reminder, it's October 11th through the 15th. That's the week that we asked for you all to block off. We being the other instructor and myself, so there are two sections of 501, and what we will be doing is combining you for that week on Zoom. So everybody will be together. We hope that that will be useful for you. It'll be useful for us in terms of being able to see the students that aren't in our section. Teresa Fritz is the other instructor for that particular class, and she is a phenomenal counselor. She works in private practice in Florida and is a graduate of our program, more recent graduate within the past 5 years. I know that for sure, but she's been doing some adjunct work for us for some time, and has actually done an immersion week before, but it was for the group counseling class. So hopefully we're going to be working together, basically, really going back and forth in terms of providing you all with little lecturettes, little, I don't like the term like a full-blown lecture. We're not going to be asking you to role play every day, all day, but role playing is going to be a big part of what we're doing during the immersion week. That's the time that we're able to see the skills that you're developing. We're able to provide you with some constructive feedback, and then you're able to use that in a safe space with your classmates, and begin to really start to develop and hone those skills, those effective micro skills that you should be developing at this point in your tenure with us. So Teresa and I are going to be working together to come up with really, how the structure of the week will go. Typically, what I've done in the past, so the last time that I did the immersion week for 501, I had planned to do it in person, and in a week and a half period of time, I had to pivot and turn it into an online immersion week, because that was March of 2020. And at that time, I didn't really even know how to use Zoom. So it's amazing how far things have come, but I've helped out with the past immersion weeks in 501 and 609 in the past couple of semesters. I just, at the time, hadn't been teaching those particular classes. So this will be my first time leading and spearheading the immersion week in a different way than what I had to do it in March of 2020, because that is not what I had anticipated. So you're going to have during that week a good amount of things to do in the evening. I don't like to beat around the bush on that one. You're going to have some readings and potentially some discussion posts or journaling that you might be doing in the evenings, because I really want you to be reflecting on the work that was done during the day. I understand Zoom fatigue is a real thing. It is for us as well. So we're going to be building in breaks throughout that week so that you can take some time to get away from the computer and get away from the screen and stretch your legs and move those muscles and clear your thoughts a little bit. We'll be building in time for a lunch break, obviously, and for some breaks, to take care, to practice some self-care during that time as well. A couple of other housekeeping things that we're going to be doing during that week. You will be reviewing the program of study, whether you're wanting to go full-time or take one of our part-time tracks. You're going to be reviewing that. We feel like during the immersion week for the 501 class, about that mid-semester point, for those of you, usually actually for everybody, you get a better sense of what you know you can handle in terms of, how many classes should you be taking, or what you're able to manage realistically with all the other responsibilities that you have going on. So if there is a change that needs to be made, let's say that you came into the program anticipating going full-time, getting through in 2 years, and now you're realizing, wow, that's a lot. I really think I might choose one of the part-time options. That's a time to kind of change that program of study. If you want to bump it up, that's certainly something you can look at with your advisor as well. So if you started out part-time, but you're doing great and you want to take an extra class next semester, that could be something to look at and consider as well. So we're going to spend some time together talking about those programs of study, what they look like, and then you'll actually be required to sign off on it and upload it as an assignment in our courses so that we have a record of it, rather than, again, when we would do this in person, we would have you meet with your advisor face to face and sign the actual physical document together. And then we as advisors would take it to Donna, who would nicely put it in your student file. Now we cannot do that. So we're looking at a different way to accomplish that same goal. We also are going to have you sign the acknowledgement that you have read the program handbook, and so Donna should have sent that. If not, we have it on our website, and I'm going to provide you with a link to it as well before the immersion week. So we have to have that documented as well for CACREP and accreditation. I'll also take some time to address any questions. Like I said, we're going to be doing a lot of work. We're going to be doing a lot of role plays, and you have your 2 main observations that are graded for the class at the beginning of the week and at the end of the week. And so we are going to be doing some required aspects of immersion week, but we are going to be taking some time just to be able to talk with each other. If you've got questions for me, you can ask them. I really want it to be as stress-free as possible, if that's a thing, whenever you have to go into a week with otherwise strangers doing role plays in front of professors. But I do like to minimize stress as much as possible during that time, and really be able to connect with you all and help you connect with each other, because having the model that we do with people coming in more as a cohort, it really is helpful for you to get to know your colleagues and your classmates, and those are relationships that you're going to have for the remainder of your career, I can promise you that, and that will help you get through this program. So, okay, I think that's all I had to say about immersion week. There's not going to be anything that's due on Monday, okay, for immersion week. So it's not like you're going to have to, be doing some studying or whatever it might be. There's not like a quiz. There's not a quiz during the entire week at all, or any kind of exam. So there's not any surprises. If you know me by now, I don't like to surprise my students. So I will provide you all with an agenda for that week prior to the week. Whenever I can work that into my time, but you'll get some material. I'll open up the content folder a little bit early so you can see what all we'll be doing. But really, I just want you to come and be ready to engage with your peers and, soak up some information about counseling. We'll get a little bit more into theories, and Teresa, of course, will be able to lend her current up-to-date knowledge and expertise and running a private practice and working clinically right now. She has also got some certifications. She's certified in EMDR and can speak extensively to that. So I'll try to, if I'm going to make a mental note now, to provide you with a little bit more information about her and maybe a link to a profile that I'm assuming is out there for her private practice. So I'll try to remember that. Okay, so let's get to multicultural competence. So multicultural competence is something that I think within the world of counseling is not a new topic for us. We, as counselors in the counseling profession, our counselor identity, our professional counselor identity, a number of years ago, really switched our focus from kind of having that surface level understanding that, yeah, there's different cultures, people are people, there's lots of differences out there, we need to be aware of that, to really dedicating space within our master's programs for cultural issues courses. So that's a requirement. Every CACREP accredited program throughout the United States of America has to have a cultural issues component to their coursework. So you have to have that course incorporated. And so that's nothing new. I graduated in 2009. It was new in 2009, but that was a long time ago at this point. So in addition to that, we have seen consistently within accreditation standards and within ethical codes, an increased focus on cultural competence and more recently social justice issues and advocacy. And so as we prepare to go into our next accreditation cycle, which some of you may still be with us when we are going through that and finishing up your program, because it takes a while to go through an accreditation cycle, the newer accreditation standards really emphasize across all courses, increasing competence in cultural issues, increasing competence in social justice, and increasing competence in advocacy work. So there are three different areas which, for a lot of people, when you think of multicultural competence, and in the general public, I think, maybe misconstrues what multicultural competence means. And when you're looking at it from a perspective of different professions, it can look a little bit different depending on the profession. When we talk about multicultural counseling, we're really talking about recognizing diversity. And whenever I say diversity in this class and any other class, I am meaning diversity to the broadest extent, okay? We are embracing approaches that support the lived experience of our clients based on whatever category they might self-identify. We are providing them a safe space within our counseling sessions to talk about issues around social justice or social injustices, I should say, racism, discrimination, all of the above. And we're providing them with an advanced level of empathetic understanding. And by that, I mean that we are non-judgmental in every sense of the word. So we understand that every client that's coming to us has a unique background, and their background doesn't just extend from the day that they were born to the day that they come to see us. Their background includes their parents' background, their grandparents' background, their cultural background, their community background, where they have lived in this world, socioeconomic status, how they have developed an identity throughout their life and how that has been shaped and why it's been shaped in the way it does. So there are all these different contexts that we take into consideration. And now in 2021 and beyond, really, I think there's been a renewed focus for the better in our profession on how we're actually doing that. What skills do we have to develop in order to say that we are multiculturally competent counselors, which is a mouthful, but it is what it is. So multiculturalism, as it relates to counseling, is not a new concept. It's not a new construct. It's not something new to our profession. What happened, I would say, within the past, probably a decade ago, was that there was an additional focus on social justice competence. And at that time, there was a bit of a debate within our profession about whether or not social justice was something that was a separate construct from multicultural competence. And if so, what did it mean? How do we define it as counselors? If not, how did it wrap into multiculturalism? Kind of this debate of, was social justice, or is social justice, an important enough concept as it relates to counseling to consider it independently on its own? And so in the counseling profession, we have what are called forces, okay? So we have these waves of thought that have come through and shaped our profession up until now. So we had psychoanalytic perspectives with Freud. That was the first force, right? Psychoanalysis. And then we kind of moved into humanistic and behavioral concepts and theories, right? With the different theoretical orientations that came along with Carl Rogers and Albert Ellis and everybody else in between. And then, those were the second and third. We had people proposing, so the multicultural competence became the fourth force in counseling. And so that happened, like I said, probably early 2000s was, I think, whenever you could gauge that was coming about. And at that time, that's when we had that increased focus on developing cultural issues courses within CACREP accredited programs. We had developments of multicultural competencies. Actually, that was in the early 90s and revamped. And I actually put a link within this module to the subgroup of ACA, the Multicultural Counseling subgroup website, where you can find those multicultural counseling competencies. When they were updated to include social justice competencies as well. So in the early 90s, we had this fourth force in counseling being a refocusing of our attention, a renewed focus of attention on multicultural issues as it relates to the counseling profession. And that's when you really saw an explosion of research around cultural issues. By and large, in those earlier days, the cultural issues really focused on basic demographic characteristics, race, ethnicity, sometimes religion, not so much. We really at that point weren't talking about gender. We weren't talking about sexual identity. All of those things, we just weren't, we weren't there yet. Not that was not something important to be talking about. It just is that if you look at the literature, there's much more of a focus on issues around differences in client success whenever the client and counselor were different races. And so we saw within all fields of counseling that basically we weren't doing a good job. We just were not doing a good job. Counselors were kind of using the colorblind mentality that, we're going to be treating every client as a unique individual, and I'm going to be providing equal services across the board, and I'm not going to differentiate between different clients. The theoretical orientation I'm using is applicable to everybody in the same way, and that is that. And so what we saw during that fourth force in counseling was really different reasons why. So support for why, that evidence-based practice aspect, for why we needed to change our mindset and why we needed to go back further than that and change how we're training counselors. And so what happened was you had these the studies that came out that basically said the clients weren't being provided with equal services, that prejudices were coming out in terms of access to services, access to resources, promotion of continued counseling services to clients that were in minority groups. It runs the gamut. So whenever we started to tackle that, and I think we're in a better place. I will say, whenever I went through my master's program and the cultural issues text that we used, it was very much it really relied on those stereotypes that we think of like 5 standard different cultural differences. And so it really didn't touch on the intersectionality of all of the minority groups that we actually do see in the counseling profession. So we've seen some changes in that. And I think the textbooks that are out there are much better than what I had to deal with whenever I was in my master's program. But then you saw the fifth force in counseling, or what some proposed as the fifth force in counseling, being social justice. And at the time that was proposed, again, we're talking, a decade ago, it wasn't readily received by the profession as a whole. And again, it goes back to those ideas of that social justice just fit in the same box as multicultural counseling, and that if you were a culturally competent counselor and a clinically competent counselor, if you had both of those things going for you, that naturally you were also attending to issues of social justice within that counseling relationship, and that you were providing some type of advocacy for your client, whether that was advocacy in terms of promoting self-advocacy in our clients, because we can, it's like teaching, whatever that adage is about teaching somebody to fish, or now I'm just going to butcher that. So whatever, you can catch a fish or teach somebody to fish and they catch more fish, whatever that thing is. I'm not a fisher person. So basically we could be advocating for our clients, and part of our job is to do that. We should be advocating for our clients in whatever way we see fit. But we also have to teach our clients how to self-advocate, because when they're able to self-advocate, then they are able to move mountains, and there's only so much that we can do, and that mental energy, emotional energy, and physical energy that we can provide in terms of advocacy, if we're also wanting to do the other things that you all are probably wanting to do, like actually counsel individuals. So where was I going with this? So that's where the fifth force in counseling came, was within social justice. I think now we as a profession will, more readily say, and I've always believed that that in fact was a pivotal moment in our in moving our understanding, on expanding our understanding of diversity and how issues around social justice and social injustices really impact our clients to an extent that we have to study, and we have to become aware of, and we have to become aware of our own values and our own biases and our own prejudices and where those come from and where they stem from in order to understand the worldview of our clients. Again, and I'm saying worldview in the greatest way that you can comprehend worldview. So I think I've really jumped around on my slides and gone way off topic with the history behind multicultural counseling. And so I'm just gonna, slides 4, 5, 6, 7, really just providing an outline of what is meant when we use specific terms in our profession. And again, worldview, you're going to hear me say worldview a lot if you have me for class. So I'm always asking my students to really consider their worldview when it comes to providing counseling. You have to understand who you are. That's a critical component to this class. And I think within the discussion boards from last week, specifically, we are in last week, and even though not everybody has posted it, when you think about your communication style and you think about your listening style, all of that is shaped by some type of outside force, or some type of outside force had played a role in how you perceive communication, how you perceive verbal cues, nonverbal cues, and then at some point in your life you realized whether or not how you were influenced was something that you wanted to stick, right? That if you wanted to change, you had an opportunity to change as an adult. We're often shaped as children in ways that we obviously aren't agreeable to. We're shaped by an environment that we have very little control over as children. And so we all have adverse experiences, we have positive experiences, and all of that blends together to form who we are as we move into adulthood. And then we have that autonomy as adults, generally speaking, to make changes where we see fit. And so our worldview changes, our worldview shifts. Our lived experience continues to grow as we age, if we're lucky to age and have a continuation of developing that worldview and those lived experiences. The same can be said for our clients. So it's always a two-part thing with this class, right? We're always looking at these micro skills in counseling, how we are developing micro skills, but then also what development of those micro skills look like when a client is on the other side of them. So if I'm examining who I am as a person and I'm being really self-reflective, part of that is acknowledging what I don't know. And there are a lot of different things that we don't know about clients. And part of what we don't know is what their worldview is, what their background is, how they have come to be who they are. And we should never be assuming anything. I'm always big about person first language. And so you will notice, I'm sure, that I really truly dislike certain terms like suffering. And that's in particular just one of them. I don't like the term suffering. If a client tells me that they're suffering, that's their lived experience. They are suffering and they're telling me that. And I'm going to note that as a objective observation, right? They told me these words. I am never going to assume that my clients are suffering. Why? Because that's not for me to assume. They might be thriving in different ways. They might be struggling in other ways, but suffering, really takes somebody to a different level in terms of ability and what they're able to do or not able to do. And so that's a term that I just really dislike. So we don't ever say that somebody is suffering unless they've told us that they're suffering, and then we're using it in that context, right? That's being strength-based, positive, all of those good things that we should be. So I feel like, again, that's a soapbox. So in terms of multicultural competence, and now you might be asking, well, Dr. Simpson, if we should be thinking about social justice competence, why aren't we talking about that right now? Because like I said, I view them as two different constructs. And even though we see a lot of overlap in terms of what the research and literature shows us, in terms of what counseling competencies are out there, I see them as two different areas of competence that students and professionals and educators should be looking at through different lenses. So we will get to social justice competence in this class. It just won't be today. So when we're talking about multicultural competence, we're really thinking about it residing in 4 different areas. One, our attitudes and beliefs, right? That's what I just said. We have to be aware of our own values, biases, influences, socio-political influences are included in all of that. We have to know where we came from and why we are the way we are. And it can be difficult to get past that because a lot of us, change is difficult. If change were easy, then people would be open to change more readily. Change is difficult. And so if we notice certain things in ourselves that are going to be a barrier to developing that relationship with our client, then we have to work on changing ourselves. That's not for our clients to change in us. Our clients might point some things out, and rightfully so. They have that right to do it. But it is up to us to make those changes. It is up to us to continue to develop competence as we continue on as professional counselors. It's an ethical obligation as well. Knowledge, understanding the worldview of the client, developing cognitive empathy. How do we understand that worldview of the client? That ties in with skills and action. So we have to integrate certain strategies and techniques into our work, into our counseling, that will allow us to better understand the worldview of a client. I believe the first place that starts is in an intake and asking the right types of questions on those intake forms and asking them in the right way. And part of what we can do in terms of action as counselors, and that you all have the ability to do as novice counselors who will be going out and working at some point in the very near future, you have the ability to be really critical when you're looking at things like an intake form and be able to say, you know, I think this is a great intake form, but there are a couple questions that I think would really benefit us to add. You know, if a form is using binary pronouns, like how about we talk to somebody about, you know, the importance of changing that and what that can do for the mindset of our clients. And like I'm trying to, like, there was a form recently that one of my kids' school sent home, and it was like father's job, mother's job, and I'm like, that's really, you know, presuming a lot of things, right? So it's just going and being aware that we have that ability and we have that responsibility to try to take some action, do some work to address these challenging issues. And again, there's lots of the different ways that we can do that in counseling. I'm just pointing out what, you know, at the very onset, if you think of even looking at a potential practicum or internship site's website, what does their website look like? Is it actually welcoming to a broad range of individuals or not? And if not, you know, would that particular place be open to change? And then you, as a future counselor, would need to think of, you know, where your values lie and what type of agency you would want to work for. So that's just a little bit. Now, the addressing framework that I have provided for you on slides 12 and 13, the references in slide 14, is one that I really like because I think it really provides an outline for hitting all those points, hitting all those main things to cover with a client right off the bat so that you can start to build a better view of what their worldview is. It's a puzzle. Our clients aren't readily giving us all the pieces of that puzzle sometimes. There might be hesitancy because they've had bad experiences with counselors in the past. Maybe they've had 30 counselors and they're just tired of counselors, and you happen to be the next one on the list and they just don't feel like telling you anything. And then you have, the clients on the other end of the spectrum that are just, dumping everything onto you that first day, and you have to filter through all of it. But I've always felt like Pamela Hayes did a great job, even though it's older now, 2008, really pinpointing within this nice little acronym specific areas that can be addressed early on in that therapeutic relationship so that you can start to build an understanding of who your client is and where they're coming from. And so I did provide, because I'm about specifics, how do you ask this information, because it can be difficult and it can be uncomfortable. And part of that discomfort comes from admitting in a roundabout way, in an inadvertent way, that there are things you don't know, and being able to ask a client to explain their cultural background, asking a client to explain their religious belief system, asking a client to explain even their political beliefs if it ties into the goals of the counseling session in general. Asking those types of questions can provide them with that autonomy that we are supposed to be allowing them for that counseling session, right? They're able then to take the reins in that discussion and tell us who they really are. And within doing that, if we are displaying unconditional positive regard, if we are displaying empathy, if we are displaying understanding, if we are reflecting feelings and emotions, then that is only building up that therapeutic relationship and encouraging them that they can come back, which we always like to see, right? So with that, I'm going to leave you all to the rest of the rest of the module. It was a little bit longer of a lecture today. My apologies. So I've offered some questions to consider as part of your self-reflection process. You don't have to comment on those if you don't want to within our discussion, but feel free. And again, I encourage you to take a look at the Multicultural Counseling Center website and those multicultural and social justice counseling competencies. They are important. So, all right. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and I'll provide you all with more information on the immersion week soon. Okay. Have a good day.